I'm Rosanna, 32 years old, and I never thought I'd be sharing this story with you. 5 years of marriage, and there we sat in that fancy restaurant surrounded by candlelight and memories. My husband Jack ordered an expensive bottle of wine, took my hand, and confessed to his affair. He expected tears. Instead, I reached into my purse and pulled out our prenuptial agreement. His smile froze as reality hit him. I still remember his smile freezing as reality hit him. If you're watching this from a place where you felt betrayed, drop a comment below. And if this is your first time here, consider subscribing as I share how I rebuilt my life after heartbreak. When I met Jack Peterson at a business conference in Chicago 7 years ago, I thought I had found my forever person. I was 25, then ambitious, and focused on my career as a financial analyst. Jack was 29, charming with a quick wit and confidence that filled the room. He was the marketing director for a competing firm, and we connected over drinks at the hotel bar after a long day of presentations. Our conversation flowed effortlessly that night. We discovered shared passions for travel, fine dining, and 1980s music. Jack had this way of making me laugh that no one else could match. His blue eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and he listened with genuine interest to my thoughts on investment strategies and market trends. Most men would have been bored, but Jack seemed fascinated. We exchanged numbers, and within a week he had called to ask me out to dinner. Our first official date was at an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. I remember wearing a red dress that I had bought specifically for the occasion. When he saw me, his eyes lit up, and I knew right then that this was different from any relationship I had experienced before. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Weekend getaways to nearby cities, surprise picnics in the park, and long walks along Lake Michigan became our routine. After 6 months of dating, Jack proposed during a trip to Napa Valley. He got down on one knee in a vineyard at sunset, and I said yes without hesitation. The diamond ring was stunning, custom designed with a center stone surrounded by smaller diamonds. I was so in love that I could barely contain my happiness. Our wedding was everything I had dreamed of since I was a little girl. We married at the Botanical Gardens with 200 guests witnessing our vows. I wore a designer gown with a cathedral-length veil, and Jack looked handsome in his tailored tuxedo. We honeymooned in Bali for 2 weeks, exploring temples, lounging on beaches, and planning our future together. After returning home, we bought a beautiful 4-bedroom house in the suburbs. It had a spacious backyard, a gourmet kitchen, and enough room for the family we planned to start. I decorated each room with care, creating a warm and inviting space that reflected both our personalities. Jack had a den where he could work from home when needed, and I had my own office space filled with plants and natural light. Our careers continued to flourish. I received a promotion to senior financial advisor at my firm, while Jack became the vice president of marketing at his company. We were the couple that others envied, successful professionals with a beautiful home and what seemed like a perfect marriage. Despite our romantic beginning, I had always been practical about financial matters. My parents had gone through a messy divorce when I was in college, and I had seen firsthand how devastating it could be when emotions and finances collided. So, when I suggested a prenuptial agreement before our wedding, Jack was initially hurt. "Don't you trust me?" he had asked, a flash of something I couldn't quite identify crossing his face. "Of course I do," I assured him. "But this isn't about trust. It's about being smart. We both have assets to protect, and this is just a safety net that hopefully we'll never need." After several discussions and some gentle persuasion, Jack agreed. Our prenup was thorough drafted by my attorney and reviewed by his. It included specific clauses about division of assets, property ownership, and what would happen in various scenarios. One particular clause stated that in case of infidelity proven with evidence, the cheating spouse would forfeit rights to jointly acquired assets during the marriage. At the time, Jack joked, "Well, I guess I'll have to be on my best behavior forever." We both laughed, signing the document with the assumption that it would gather dust in a file cabinet somewhere never to be needed. For the first 4 years of our marriage, life was good. We traveled extensively, visiting Paris, Tokyo, Sydney, and countless other destinations. We hosted dinner parties for our friends and attended charity galas. Jack's family welcomed me as one of their own, and my parents adored him. His mother, Patricia, would often comment on what beautiful grandchildren we would have someday. The topic of children came up frequently in our 3rd year of marriage. I was ready to start trying, but Jack always had a reason to wait. First, it was that he wanted to reach a specific position at work. Then it was that we should renovate the guest room into a proper nursery first. Later it was that we should take one more big trip before being tied down with parental responsibilities. I was patient, understanding that becoming a parent was a huge step that both partners needed to be ready for. Looking back, I see that these delays were just the beginning of the distance that would grow between us. Those early years were filled with love, laughter, and the creation of what I thought was an unshakable foundation. I believed with all my heart that Jack was my person, my partner, and my future. I had no idea that beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect life, cracks were already beginning to form. The first sign that something was changing came about 7 months before our 5th anniversary. Jack started coming home later from work. Not dramatically late, just an hour or 2 past his usual time. When I asked about it, he would mention work pressure, deadlines, or client meetings that ran long. "The Thompson account is killing me," he would say, loosening his tie and pouring himself a generous glass of whiskey. The client changed their mind again about the campaign direction. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? His company was expanding rapidly, and with his recent promotion came additional responsibilities. I would heat up dinner for him and listen sympathetically as he vented about workplace politics and demanding clients. Then came the constant texting. Jack had always been attached to his phone like most professionals, but now it seemed to demand his attention even during our rare quality time together. He would position it face down on the table or couch beside him, and it would light up frequently with notifications that he would check when he thought I wasn't looking. One evening, while we were watching a movie together, his phone buzzed for the 10th time. When I glanced over, I noticed he was smiling at the screen, a different kind of smile than his usual work-related expressions. "Important client?" I asked casually. He startled slightly. "No, just Dave from the office sending some memes." He put the phone in his pocket rather than face down as he usually did. Dave was his buddy from the marketing department, so I didn't think too much of it at the time. But looking back, that was the moment a tiny seed of doubt was planted. Our arguments began to increase in frequency. They were minor at first, disagreements about household chores or plans for the weekend, but they soon escalated to more significant issues. Jack became critical of how much I worked, even though he was the one coming home later and later. "You're always buried in spreadsheets and investment reports," he complained one Sunday when I spent a few hours preparing for a big client meeting. "We never do anything fun anymore." The irony wasn't lost on me. "I'm not the one coming home at 8 every night," I responded. "And I've suggested 3 weekend trips in the past 2 months that you've shot down." These types of exchanges became more common. The warm, supportive man I had married seemed to be transforming into someone more impatient and distant. The playfulness that had characterized our early relationship was fading. Around this time, I brought up the topic of starting a family again. We were both established in our careers, financially stable, and our house had plenty of room for children. But Jack was more resistant than ever. "Can we talk about this later?" he asked, rubbing his temples. "Work is insane right now, and I can't imagine adding the stress of a newborn." I agreed to wait, but my biological clock was ticking. At 32, I was acutely aware that fertility declined with age, but I wanted us to be on the same page before bringing a child into the world. One day, while looking for a receipt for tax purposes, I came across a credit card statement of Jack's that showed a purchase from an expensive jewelry store. It was 2 months before my birthday, so I assumed he was planning a surprise. I felt guilty for accidentally discovering it and decided not to mention it. But my birthday came and went with only a bouquet of flowers and a gift card to my favorite clothing store. The jewelry never materialized. When I casually mentioned seeing a friend with a beautiful new necklace, hoping to prompt Jack to give me whatever he had purchased, he showed no reaction. The jewelry store charge remained a mystery, one that gnawed at the back of my mind, but that I wasn't ready to confront directly. I told myself there must be a reasonable explanation. Perhaps he had bought something for his mother's upcoming birthday, or maybe he had returned the item. Another red flag appeared when Jack suddenly became interested in fitness. He had always been in decent shape, but now he was hitting the gym 4 times a week, buying new clothes, and experimenting with different hairstyles. On the surface, these were positive changes, and I encouraged his newfound health consciousness. "You look great," I told him one evening as he returned from the gym, his hair still damp from the shower. "This new routine really suits you." He seemed pleased, but almost uncomfortable with my compliment. "Thanks. Just trying to stay healthy." One night, while Jack was showering, his phone lit up on the coffee table. It was a text notification that simply read, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." Same time, the sender was listed as SC Work. I felt a pang in my chest, but resisted the urge to unlock his phone and investigate further. Trust was important to me, and I didn't want to become the kind of wife who snooped through her husband's private communications. I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt, but the message joined the growing list of small concerns accumulating in my mind. All these little changes individually could be explained away. But together, they were forming a pattern that became increasingly difficult to ignore. Still, I wasn't ready to face what these signs might mean. I loved Jack, and the thought of him betraying our marriage was too painful to consider. So I pushed my suspicions aside, choosing to believe in the man I had married, rather than the evidence mounting before my eyes. "I saw Jack having lunch with a woman yesterday," Amanda said, stirring her iced tea with deliberate slowness. "At that new French bistro downtown." We were having our monthly lunch date at a cafe near my office. Amanda had been my best friend since college, and she was not one to gossip unnecessarily. Her expression was serious, concerned. "I'm sure it was a client meeting," I replied automatically, though my heart had already started to race. "He has those all the time." Amanda hesitated. "They seemed pretty friendly for a business lunch." There was a lot of touching Rosanna, her hand on his arm, him brushing her hair back. "I thought you should know." I forced a smile. Jack's always been tactile with everyone. It's probably nothing. But Amanda's words stayed with me. That night, I asked Jack casually about his day, whether he'd had any interesting meetings. He mentioned a conference call with the creative team and lunch at his desk, reviewing quarterly reports. The lie was so smooth, so effortless, that I almost doubted Amanda's account. A week later, my friend Brian, who worked at a law firm a few blocks from Jack's office, called me with an awkward question. "Rosanna, was Jack staying at the Hilton downtown last Thursday? I could have sworn I saw him in the lobby around 3 in the afternoon with a woman. They were heading toward the elevators." My mouth went dry. No, that couldn't have been him. He was in a full-day workshop at the convention center. Another lie Jack had told me now exposed. Brian backpedaled quickly. "Must have been someone who looked like him then. Sorry to bother you with it." I thanked him for checking and hung up my hands, trembling slightly. 2 separate sightings by 2 different friends. The coincidence was too great to dismiss. That weekend, I visited my mother for Sunday brunch. She could tell something was wrong the moment I walked through her door. "You look tired, sweetheart," she said, pouring me a cup of coffee. "Is everything okay?" Before I knew it, I was telling her about the changes in Jack's behavior, the mysterious jewelry purchase, the contradicting stories. I left out the sightings by my friends, not quite ready to voice those concerns aloud to my mother. She listened patiently, her expression growing more troubled. When I finished, she took my hands in hers. "Rosanna, I've been through this. Your father showed the same signs before I discovered his affair. You're a smart woman. Deep down, I think you know what's happening." "But I don't have any proof," I protested. "And what if I'm just being paranoid? What if it's all innocent and I accuse him of something terrible?" "Then you need to find out for sure," she advised, "for your own peace of mind. Because living with suspicion will eat away at you until there's nothing left." The following Tuesday, I stopped by Jack's office unexpectedly, bringing lunch as a surprise. His secretary, Maria, looked uncomfortable when I asked to see him. "He's actually out at a meeting," she said, avoiding my gaze. "I'm not sure when he'll be back." "No problem," I replied cheerfully. "I'll just leave this on his desk." As Maria led me to his office, I noticed a framed photo on his desk of the two of us from our vacation in Greece last year. But there was something else that caught my eye, a woman's scarf draped over the back of the visitor's chair. It wasn't mine. On my way out, I ran into Devin, one of Jack's team members. He looked startled to see me. "Rosanna, what brings you here?" "Just dropping off lunch for Jack," I explained. "Though apparently he's in a meeting." Devin's expression flickered with something like guilt. "Right, yes. The creative strategy session with Sophie." The name hit me like a physical blow. Sophie. SC. The initials from the text message. "Sophie Crawford?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "The new creative director?" Devin nodded. "They've been working closely on the Hartman campaign. Very closely." The emphasis wasn't lost on me. Devin was trying to tell me something without saying it directly. That evening, I began exploring Jack's social media accounts more carefully. He wasn't particularly active online, but he did post occasional photos from company events and business trips. In several recent images, I noticed the same woman appearing in the background or at the edge of group photos. Tall, blonde, stylish. In one picture from a company retreat 2 months ago, she was standing next to Jack, their shoulders touching both, smiling broadly. I found her profile easily. Sophie Crawford, Creative Director. Her page was filled with artistic photos, inspirational quotes about taking chances, and subtle references to a new relationship that made her feel alive again. There were no photos of Jack directly, but there were several check-ins at restaurants and venues I knew Jack had claimed to be working late on those same evenings. The final push came from my sister Jenna. We met for coffee, and after listening to my mounting evidence, she didn't mince words. "You need to prepare for the worst, Rosanna. Not just emotionally, but practically. If he is cheating, what's your plan?" I hadn't thought that far ahead. I'd been so focused on confirming my suspicions that I hadn't considered what I'd do if they proved true. "I don't know," I admitted. "I guess we'd try counseling." Jenna shook her head. "Before any of that, you need to protect yourself. Remember your prenup? If he's cheating, you need proof, not just suspicions, and you need to be ready for whatever comes next." She was right. It was time to stop burying my head in the sand. If Jack was betraying our marriage, I needed to know for certain, and I needed to be prepared for the fallout. The decision to hire a private investigator wasn't easy. It felt like an admission that my marriage was already over, that trust had been irrevocably broken. But after weeks of mounting evidence and inconsistencies in Jack's stories, I knew I needed objective confirmation. I found Thomas Clark through a careful online search, selecting him for his discretion and experience with matrimonial investigations. We met in a quiet cafe far from my usual haunts, where I was unlikely to run into anyone I knew. "I need to know if my husband is having an affair," I said, getting straight to the point after introductions. "I have reasons to suspect, but I need proof." Thomas was professional, asking relevant questions without judgment. I provided him with Jack's schedule vehicle information and a recent photograph. I also mentioned Sophie Crawford specifically. Most clients already know the truth when they come to me, Thomas said kindly. They just need confirmation to move forward. I'll be thorough and discreet. You'll have your answer within a week. The wait was excruciating. I went through the motions of daily life, maintaining a facade of normalcy with Jack. We ate dinner together when he was home, discussed mundane topics, and slept in the same bed, though we hadn't been intimate in weeks. Exactly 6 days later, Thomas requested another meeting. When I arrived at his office, he had a folder waiting for me. "I think you should prepare yourself before looking at these," he warned. The folder contained dozens of photographs and a detailed report. Jack and Sophie entering her apartment building together. Jack kissing her in his car in the parking garage near his office. The two of them holding hands across a table at an intimate restaurant in a neighboring town. There were time-stamped hotel visits, receipts for gifts Jack had purchased for her, including the jewelry I had discovered on his statement. The report indicated their affair had been going on for at least 7 months, predating many of the changes I had noticed in his behavior. 7 months of lies, deception, and betrayal. I sat in Thomas's office, strangely calm, as I processed the information. The shock would come later, I knew, but in that moment, I felt an odd sense of clarity. My intuition had been correct. I wasn't crazy or paranoid. My husband was cheating on me. "There's one more thing," Thomas said, sliding another document across the desk. "Based on the information you provided about your prenuptial agreement, I took the liberty of noting instances that would specifically apply as evidence. The infidelity clause is quite clear, and these photographs and receipts should be sufficient proof." I thanked him, paid his fee, and left with the file. In my car, I finally allowed myself to feel the full impact of what I had discovered. Tears came hot and angry as I thought of all the moments Jack had lied to my face. All the times he had been with her, then come home to me. The complete disregard for our vows, our history, our love. That afternoon, I made an appointment with Eleanor Winters, the attorney who had drafted our prenuptial agreement. I brought the investigator's file with me to her office. "This is certainly conclusive evidence of infidelity," she confirmed after reviewing the material. "The clause in your agreement is quite straightforward. In the event of proven infidelity, the offending party forfeits rights to jointly acquired assets during the marriage, including the marital home joint investment accounts and any businesses started or significantly expanded during the marriage." "What about his retirement accounts?" I asked. "Those remain his separate property, as do any assets he owned prior to marriage. But anything acquired or significantly appreciated during your marriage would be subject to the terms of the agreement." Eleanor walked me through the next steps, explaining how to file for divorce and what documentation I would need. She advised me to gather important financial records, make copies of essential documents, and prepare for Jack to potentially contest the prenup once he realized its implications. "People often react unpredictably when cornered," she warned. "Even with a solid prenup, be prepared for him to fight it." Following her advice, I spent the next few days secretly preparing. I copied financial statements, property deeds, investment account information, and tax returns. I photographed valuable items in our home and compiled a list of all our assets. I opened a separate bank account at a different bank and transferred a portion of my personal savings into it, enough to sustain me for several months if needed. I also discovered that Jack had been spending lavishly on Sophie. Expensive dinners, weekend getaways labeled as business trips, jewelry, and designer clothing. He had even paid the security deposit on her new apartment. Our joint credit card showed charges at hotels within our own city, just miles from our home. The audacity was stunning. As I gathered evidence and prepared logistically, I was also processing my emotions. The initial shock gave way to profound sadness, then to anger. How could he do this? How could he look me in the eye each day, tell me he loved me all while carrying on with someone else? What had I done to deserve this betrayal? But amid the pain, I found my resolve strengthening. I refused to be a victim. I would not beg or plead for a man who had so thoroughly disrespected our marriage. I would face this with dignity and protect myself in the process. Our 5th wedding anniversary was approaching. Jack had suggested we celebrate at La Maison, an upscale French restaurant where we had dined on our 1st anniversary. Little did he know I had made my own plans for that evening. I decided that would be the moment of reckoning. Not out of a desire for public drama, but because I wanted to confront him on a day that should have represented our commitment and love. I wanted him to remember every year on that date the consequences of his actions. I made a copy of our prenuptial agreement highlighting the infidelity clause. I placed it in an elegant envelope along with printed copies of several key photographs from the investigator's file. This would be my anniversary gift to my unfaithful husband. The night before our anniversary, I barely slept. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would remain composed, how I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. I was done with tears. Now I needed strength. Our anniversary fell on a Friday. I spent extra time getting ready that evening, selecting a black dress that Jack had always admired, styling my hair in loose waves, applying my makeup with precision. If this was to be one of our final encounters as husband and wife, I wanted to look my best. Not for him, but for myself. I placed the envelope containing the prenup and photos in my clutch purse, along with my credit card and ID. I wasn't sure how the evening would end, but I wanted to be prepared to leave separately if necessary. Jack arrived home from work on time for once, bringing a bouquet of red roses. "Happy anniversary, beautiful," he said, kissing my cheek. He seemed nervous, fidgety. "These are lovely," I replied, placing them in a vase with deliberate care. "Are you ready to go? Our reservation is at 8. During the drive to the restaurant, Jack was unusually talkative, filling the silence with anecdotes about work and comments about the weather. I responded politely, playing along with his charade. Let him think everything was normal for now. La Maison was as elegant as I remembered, with soft lighting, crisp white tablecloths, and attentive staff. We were seated at a corner table, partially secluded from other diners. Perfect for an intimate celebration or for the conversation that was about to unfold. After ordering appetizers, Jack reached across the table for my hand. 5 years, he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Can you believe it? Time flies. I agreed, allowing him to hold my hand for a moment before withdrawing it to take a sip of water. So much has changed since our first anniversary here. Jack signaled to the sommelier. I've taken the liberty of selecting a special bottle for tonight. The Chateau Margaux 2010. I know it's your favorite. It was an extravagant choice, a bottle that cost well over $500. I wondered briefly if he had taken Sophie to expensive restaurants too, ordering overpriced wine to impress her as he had once done with me. You're pulling out all the stops tonight, I observed. The wine was presented and poured with ceremony. Jack raised his glass. To us. To 5 years and many more. I clinked my glass against his, but didn't drink. Before we toast Jack, I'd like to talk about something. He shifted in his seat, looking uncomfortable. Can it wait until after dinner? Tonight should be about celebrating. Actually, I think now is the perfect time. I maintained eye contact, studying his face. How are things at work lately? Any interesting projects? He seemed relieved by the mundane question. The usual chaos. The Hartman campaign is finally wrapping up next week. And how is Sophie Crawford still working closely with her? His hand froze midway to his wine glass. A flicker of panic crossed his features before he composed himself. Sophie? She's fine. Doing good work on the creative team. Just good work, I pressed. Nothing more to share about her. Jack's expression tightened. What are you getting at, Rosanna? I took a deep breath. This was it. I know, Jack, about you and Sophie. I know everything. He started to speak, likely to deny it, but I held up my hand. Please don't insult me by lying anymore. I have proof. The hotels, the gifts, the late nights that weren't spent at the office. 7 months, Jack. 7 months of betraying our marriage. His face went through a series of emotions, shock, guilt, then a calculated shift to contrition. Rosanna, I can explain. It wasn't planned. It just happened, and I've been trying to figure out how to tell you. By bringing me to an expensive restaurant and ordering $500 wine, I asked, my voice steady. Was that supposed to soften the blow? Jack leaned forward, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Yes, I was going to tell you tonight. I've been struggling with how to say it. It's complicated, and I never meant to hurt you. Yet here we are. I'm sorry, he said, reaching for my hand again. I pulled away. I truly am. Things with Sophie, they just evolved. We were working late, spending so much time together. One thing led to another. Spare me the details, I said coldly. I'm not interested in how you justified betraying me. Jack's expression changed, becoming more calculated. I know this is a shock, but I'm hoping we can work through this. People make mistakes, marriages survive affairs all the time. We could try counseling. That was when I realized his strategy. He thought I would cry, that I would beg him to stay and work on our marriage. He expected me to be devastated and willing to do anything to keep him. He didn't know that I had already moved past that stage of grief to something stronger and more resolute. I have something for you, I said, reaching into my purse and removing the envelope. I placed it on the table between us. My anniversary gift. Looking confused, Jack opened the envelope. His confusion turned to shock as he saw the photographs of himself and Sophie together. Beneath them was the copy of our prenuptial agreement with the infidelity clause highlighted in bright yellow. In case you've forgotten what it says, I explained calmly. It states that in the event of infidelity with supporting evidence, the offending party forfeits rights to jointly acquired assets during the marriage. That includes our house, which has appreciated considerably since we bought it, the joint investment portfolio we've built, the vacation property in Lake Tahoe, your share of the business partnership fund we started 2 years ago. Jack's face drained of color as he processed the implications. He reached for his wine glass with a trembling hand and took a large swallow. This bottle's yours, I said, gesturing to the expensive wine. Everything else isn't. His smile froze as the reality of his situation sank in. He had thought he was in control of this conversation, that he would confess on his terms and manage my reaction. Instead, I had completely upended his expectations. You can't be serious, he stammered. This is just a bump in the road. Every marriage has problems. Infidelity isn't a bump, Jack. It's a choice you made repeatedly for 7 months, and now you get to live with the consequences of that choice. He began to argue, his voice rising slightly before he remembered we were in a public place. These agreements get challenged all the time. They don't always hold up in court. Feel free to try, I replied. My attorney assures me this one is solid. But even if you manage to contest it successfully, ask yourself if it's worth the legal fees and public embarrassment. Everyone will know what you did. Your family, your friends, your colleagues. Is Sophie worth losing half of everything plus your reputation? Jack's expression hardened. You're being vindictive. This isn't like you. You're right. The old Rosanna might have cried and begged you to reconsider. She might have blamed herself or agreed to look past your betrayal. But that woman is gone. You killed her with 7 months of lies. I stood up, placing my napkin on the table. I won't be staying for dinner. I've lost my appetite. You can explain to the waiter why you're dining alone on your anniversary. Wait, Jack said urgently, standing up as well. We need to talk about this rationally. You're upset, I understand that. but making decisions while emotional never ends well. Let's take some time to think. I've had plenty of time to think, Jack. While you were with her, I was putting the pieces together. My decision is made. Please, he said, his voice breaking slightly. I love you. I made a terrible mistake, but I love you. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of sadness for what we had lost for the future we had planned together that would never come to pass. But then I remembered the calculated deception, the elaborate lies, the complete disregard for our vows and my feelings. Goodbye, Jack, I said, turning to leave. You can keep the prenup copy. I have the original safe at my attorney's office. I walked out of the restaurant with my head held high, ignoring the curious glances from other diners who had undoubtedly overheard portions of our conversation. Outside in the cool evening air, I took my first deep breath as a woman who had reclaimed her dignity and self-respect. I had expected to feel devastated after this confrontation. Instead, I felt surprisingly calm. The worst had happened, I had faced it directly, and I had survived. Whatever came next, I knew I would handle it with the same strength and clarity. Jack called me 17 times that night. I silenced my phone and stayed with my sister Jenna, who provided wine sympathy and a spare bedroom. When I finally checked my messages the next morning, they ranged from apologetic to angry to desperate. Rosanna, please call me back. We need to talk about this. You're being completely unreasonable. This isn't fair. I'll do anything. Counseling, therapy, whatever you want. Please give me another chance. You've clearly been planning this for weeks. Was any of it real? Did you ever love me? The last one made me laugh bitterly. He was the one who had been living a double life for more than half a year. Yet somehow, I was the one being accused of deception. I returned to our house the following day while Jack was at work to pack essential items. Clothes, personal documents, irreplaceable mementos, and family heirlooms. I wasn't taking anything that could be considered joint property, just my personal belongings. Eleanor had advised me to document everything I removed, so I took photos and made a detailed inventory. As I was leaving, I noticed Jack's car pulling into the driveway. He must have been watching the house, or had someone tell him I was there. I steeled myself for the confrontation. Running away? He asked as he approached me in the driveway. Very mature. I'm giving us both space, I replied calmly. My attorney will be in touch about next steps. So that's it. 5 years of marriage, and you're just walking away without even trying to work it out. His audacity was breathtaking. You walked away first, Jack. Every time you were with her, you were walking away from us. It was a mistake, he insisted. People make mistakes. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or saying something hurtful in a moment of anger. Carrying on an affair for 7 months is a series of deliberate choices. Jack's expression darkened. If you do this, if you try to take everything, I'll fight you every step of the way. I'll contest the prenup. I'll make this as difficult and expensive as possible. That's your right, I acknowledged. But consider what you're fighting for. Is it the money and property, or is it your ego that can't accept that you don't get to dictate the terms of your betrayal? I got into my car and drove away, leaving him standing in the driveway of the home we had once shared. In my rearview mirror, I could see him pull out his phone, presumably to call Sophie. I wondered if he was already moving on, or if he was simply seeking comfort from the person who had helped him destroy our marriage. The following weeks were a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and emotional upheaval. Jack made good on his threat to fight hiring an aggressive attorney who specialized in challenging prenuptial agreements. They argued that the agreement was signed under duress, that I had pressured Jack into accepting terms he didn't fully understand. It was a desperate strategy with little chance of success, given that both of us had been represented by separate counsel during the drafting and signing process. What I hadn't anticipated was Jack's campaign to control the narrative among our friends and family. He reached out to everyone we knew, telling his version of events, before I had a chance to explain. According to Jack, our marriage had been troubled for years. I had been cold, distant, obsessed with work. He had been lonely and misunderstood. Sophie was a symptom of our problems, not the cause. Some people believed him. I lost friends I had thought would stand by me. Jack's family unsurprisingly took his side with his mother, Patricia, calling me to express her disappointment in my unwillingness to forgive her son's one mistake. "Marriage is about working through difficulties," she lectured. "Everyone deserves a second chance." "I agree," I responded, "and I'm giving myself a second chance at happiness with someone who respects me." The early days after our separation were the hardest. I moved into a small apartment surrounded by boxes of my belongings that represented the fragments of my previous life. At night, the silence was deafening. Despite Jack's betrayal, I missed the comfort of another person's presence, the routine we had established over 5 years together. Sleep became elusive. I would lie awake, replaying memories, searching for signs I had missed, wondering if there had been anything I could have done differently to prevent the collapse of my marriage. During the day, I struggled to focus at work, making uncharacteristic errors that concerned my colleagues and clients. 3 weeks after our confrontation at La Maison, I ran into Sophie at an industry networking event. I had almost skipped it, knowing Jack's company would be represented, but my boss had insisted I attend to maintain relationships with key clients. Sophie spotted me across the room, and after a moment of visible hesitation, approached me directly. She was exactly as I had seen in the photographs, tall and elegantly dressed, with perfectly styled blonde hair and confident posture. "Rosanna," she said, extending her hand as if we were being introduced at a business meeting. "I think we should talk." I looked at her outstretched hand, but didn't take it. "I don't believe we have anything to discuss." "I know this is uncomfortable," she persisted, "but I want you to know that what happened with Jack and me, it wasn't planned. We didn't set out to hurt you. And yet, here we are." She lowered her voice. "Jack is devastated. He made a mistake, but he truly loves you." "Is that why he's still seeing you?" I asked. I had received confirmation from Thomas that Jack had spent several nights at Sophie's apartment since our separation. She had the decency to look embarrassed. "It's complicated. He's going through a difficult time." "So are you his confidant now? The shoulder he cries on about losing his wife while he's in your bed?" Several heads turned at my raised voice. Sophie glanced around nervously. "This isn't the place. I just wanted to say that I never intended to come between you two." "You didn't," I replied firmly. "Jack did that all on his own. You were just a willing accomplice." I walked away before she could respond, heading straight for the exit. In the taxi home, I finally allowed myself to cry, not out of sadness for losing Jack, but from the sheer exhaustion of maintaining my composure in the face of such audacity. The pressure to reconcile came from unexpected sources. My father, who had cheated on my mother years ago, called to suggest I consider forgiveness. "People make mistakes, sweetheart. If I had known what I stood to lose, I would have made different choices." "Mom didn't take you back," I reminded him. "And that's her right, but she might have been happier if she had." I thought of my mother, who had rebuilt her life after divorcing my father. She had gone back to school, started a new career, and eventually found love again with a man who treasured her. She seemed far happier than she had been in the final years of her marriage. "I don't think so," I said, "and I don't think I would be either." Through all of this, I began to question myself. Had I been a bad wife? Had I somehow driven Jack into another woman's arms? Had I been too focused on my career, too cold, too demanding? I replayed conversations and interactions, searching for the fatal flaw in myself that had caused my marriage to implode. It took sessions with a therapist specializing in betrayal trauma to help me see that I wasn't responsible for Jack's choices. Dr. Melissa Bennett helped me understand that cheating is never the victim's fault. Relationships have problems, she explained during one session. All of them do, but there are many ways to address those problems: communication counseling, or even a clean break if necessary. Deception is a choice, and it's one your husband made repeatedly. Slowly, I began to regain my emotional footing. I established new routines in my apartment, focused on my work, and reconnected with friends who had remained loyal. I joined a support group for people who had experienced infidelity, finding comfort in sharing my story with others who truly understood the unique pain of betrayal. The legal battle dragged on for months, with Jack's attorney using every possible tactic to delay proceedings and challenge the prenup. But eventually, reality set in. The evidence of infidelity was irrefutable. The prenuptial agreement was sound, and Jack's position was deteriorating with each expensive legal maneuver. 7 months after our anniversary dinner, almost exactly the length of time Jack had been cheating, before I discovered it, we reached a settlement. The prenuptial agreement was upheld in its entirety. I retained ownership of our house, the majority of our joint investment portfolio, and my full share of the business partnership fund. Jack kept his personal retirement accounts, his premarital assets, and the personal property he had already removed from our home. It wasn't about the money for me. It was about accountability. It was about consequences for choices made with full awareness of their potential impact. It was about standing up for myself when someone had treated me as disposable. The day our divorce was finalized, I didn't celebrate. Instead, I sat quietly in my apartment, looking through old photographs from happier times. I allowed myself to mourn what had been lost, not just the relationship, but the future we had planned, the children we might have had, the life we had been building together. Then I put the photos away, opened a bottle of wine, and made a silent toast to my new beginning. 2 years passed before I saw Jack again. I had sold our house using the proceeds to buy a smaller but charming condo closer to downtown. My career had continued to flourish with a promotion to executive financial advisor and a significant increase in my client portfolio. The pain of betrayal had faded to a dull ache that only occasionally surfaced, usually triggered by songs or places that held specific memories. We crossed paths at the wedding of a mutual friend, Mark, who had somehow maintained relationships with both of us throughout the divorce. I was seated at a table far from Jack's, but during the reception, we found ourselves at the bar simultaneously. "Rosanna," he said, his voice softer than I remembered. "You look well." "Thank you," I replied. "So do you." It wasn't entirely true. Jack had aged visibly in the 2 years since our divorce. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, and he had gained weight. His custom suit, once perfectly tailored, now strained slightly at the buttons. "How have you been?" he asked, the question hanging awkwardly between us. "Good. Busy with work. I bought a new place downtown." "I heard. Congratulations." He paused, swirling the scotch in his glass. "I'm in Chicago now. Took a position with a different agency there." I nodded, unsure what to say. The anger had largely dissipated, leaving only a vague sense of sadness for what might have been. "Are you here with someone?" he asked, glancing around the reception. "Yes," I admitted. "Daniel. He's speaking with the bride's father right now." Daniel and I had been dating for 6 months. He was a professor of economics at the local university, kind and thoughtful, with a wry sense of humor that had drawn me in from our first date. We were taking things slowly, both of us having emerged from previous long-term relationships with our share of scars. "And Sophie?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. My friend Amanda had kept me informed of the gossip in our old social circle. Jack's expression tightened. "That ended about a year ago. Turns out we weren't as compatible as we thought." I resisted the urge to point out the irony. Their affair, which had seemed so urgent and important that it was worth destroying our marriage for, hadn't even lasted a full year after our divorce. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, not entirely honestly. Jack looked at me intently. "I've thought a lot about us, about what happened. I made the biggest mistake of my life, Rosanna. I hope you know that I regret it every day." "Not really," he admitted, "but I'm working on it." He hesitated, then added, "I still have the house in Tahoe. I go there sometimes to think about what I lost." The vacation property had been one of the few assets excluded from our settlement due to a technicality in how it had been purchased. I had chosen not to fight for it, recognizing that some battles weren't worth the emotional cost. "I hope it brings you comfort," I said, meaning it. Despite everything, I didn't wish him continued unhappiness. Daniel appeared at my side, tall and solid, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back. I introduced them, watching as they exchanged pleasantries with surface-level politeness. Jack excused himself shortly after disappearing into the crowd of wedding guests. Later that evening, as Daniel and I danced among other couples, I caught a glimpse of Jack sitting alone at his table, watching us with an expression of quiet resignation. In that moment, I felt a final release, a letting go of the last tendrils of resentment I had been carrying. The journey from that anniversary dinner to this moment had been painful and challenging, filled with self-doubt and hard lessons. I had lost friends, confronted uncomfortable truths about myself and my marriage, and rebuilt my life piece by piece. But I had gained so much more. Self-reliance, confidence in my own judgment, and a deeper understanding of what I truly wanted in a relationship. I had learned that having boundaries wasn't selfish, it was essential. That forgiveness didn't necessarily mean reconciliation. That sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. The prenuptial agreement had protected my financial assets, but the real value was in what I had discovered about myself through the process. I was stronger than I knew, more resilient than I had believed possible. I had survived what I once thought would destroy me and emerged not just intact, but flourishing. In the 2 years since my divorce, I had traveled solo to destinations I had always wanted to visit, taken cooking classes, joined a book club, and built new friendships. I had renovated my condo myself, learning carpentry and basic plumbing from YouTube videos. I had reconnected with passions I had set aside during my marriage, painting and hiking and volunteering at the local animal shelter. I had also learned to trust again cautiously and with clear eyes. Daniel wasn't perfect, nor was I, but our relationship was built on honesty and mutual respect. We discussed our past wounds openly, using them as guideposts for how to treat each other with greater care. Looking back at Jack across the reception hall, I realized that the woman who had sat across from him at La Maison 2 years ago, pulling out a prenuptial agreement while fighting back tears, had been just beginning her transformation. That night had been painful, but it had also been necessary. It had been the moment I chose myself, my dignity, my future. The prenup saved my assets, but walking away saved my soul. Sometimes the greatest act of self-love is choosing yourself when someone else doesn't. What would your story of strength look like if you've ever faced betrayal or had to rebuild after heartbreak? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if you found value in my journey, please like this video, subscribe to my channel for more stories of resilience, and share with someone who might need to hear that there is life after betrayal. Remember, your worth isn't determined by someone else's failure to recognize it. Thank you for listening to my story.